The rain came down lazily that night, not quite a drizzle, but not a downpour either. It coated the streets of Yogyakarta in a thin sheen of dampness, reflecting the dim yellow glow of flickering streetlights. Alun-Alun Utara, usually filled with laughter and the sound of feet shuffling across gravel, was eerily quiet. The vast square stretched into shadows, haunted by the silhouettes of ancient banyan trees. Arif stood still beneath the twin banyans, bearing and Kember, as the locals called them, tall and dark. Their knotted roots burst from the earth like the fingers of something buried beneath. In his hand, Arif held a worn brown folder, its contents slightly curled at the edges from moisture. It held his thesis proposal, his final shot at graduating. The title, Mystical Architecture and the Locked Gates of the Yogyakarta Palace. It wasn't a typical thesis. His advisor had warned him, "You're dabbling in superstition, not history." But Arif insisted. There was something about that old locked gate on the northern wall of the Keraton, the Sultan's palace, that pulled at him. No one seemed to know when it was last opened. No one seemed to want to know. Some even claimed it wasn't really locked, just cursed. Tonight, he wasn't just passing by. He was here to see it, up close. The night was colder than it should have been. Arif's breath fogged in the air as he walked past the banyan trees, shoes tapping against wet stone. Ahead, partially hidden in shadow, was the gate. It was massive, more than 3 meters high, its wooden doors flanked by moss-covered stone pillars. Iron vines snaked across its surface, rusted and cruel. Strange carvings were etched into the frame, old Javanese script that had long been abandoned, worn down by rain and time. Arif's steps slowed. He felt it now, pressure, a thick tension in the air, as if the world had paused in its breath. He looked around. No one, but he could feel eyes on him as he reached into his backpack for his phone, planning to take a few pictures. A gust of wind rose from nowhere. It rustled the leaves above him and whispered past his ears like a voice too soft to hear clearly. "Shurk." He turned sharply. Nothing. Then he heard it again, this time behind the gate. A shuffle, a breath, a girl's soft humming. He leaned closer. "Hello?" he called, voice cracking slightly. No answer. He pressed his ear against the cold wood of the gate. Tap, tap. Someone was tapping on the other side. Suddenly, his phone vibrated. He looked down. The screen flickered, glitched. Then it went black. The tapping stopped, and then, faint and clear as a bell, a girl's voice. "You shouldn't have come here alone." Arif stumbled backward, heart pounding, but there was no one there, only the gate, unmoved, and the folder in his hand, now soaked, the ink of his title bleeding across the cover like veins. The echo of the girl's voice still clung to the air, like a fog that refused to lift. "You shouldn't have come here alone." Arif stood frozen, the folder now limp in his trembling hands. The bold letters of his thesis title had blurred into a chaotic inkblot, seeping like a wound across the page. Rain clung to his hair and cheeks, but he hardly felt it. He backed away from the gate slowly, eyes locked on the ancient wood. Nothing moved, no shadow, no figure, just the occasional sway of vines in the wind and the soft creak of the banyan branches. Then his phone buzzed again, screen flickering erratically with a trembling thumb. He managed to unlock it. One new image had appeared in his photo gallery. He hadn't taken any photos yet. The image showed the gate, just like he had seen it seconds ago. But in the picture, a girl stood on the other side. She wore a white kebaya, damp from the mist, her long black hair slicked against her face. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking directly at him. Arif's stomach turned cold. He stared at the photo in disbelief, then frantically looked up at the gate. No one, just silence. He spun around and walked quickly, almost running back toward the open area of the square. His soaked shoes slapped against the ground. When he turned one last time to glance back, the gate was still closed. but the flickering lamp above it suddenly died. Darkness swallowed the gate whole. He didn't stop moving until he reached the edge of Ailin, Utara. The street returned to life here barely. A distant motorbike, a vendor packing up a cart. The hum of life that suddenly felt comforting. Arif didn't go home. Instead, he walked straight to his boarding house's library. It was small, cramped, and barely used, but he knew one thing: there were old city maps and historical texts in the back room, ones most students didn't even bother looking at. He needed to know what was behind that gate. At midnight, under the dim light of a flickering ceiling bulb, he pored through ancient blueprints of the Keraton, looking for signs of an old building, a tomb, anything behind the sealed wall. Hours passed. The storm outside picked up again. And then he found it, a mention, half buried in a 1923 colonial-era field report. Northern Gate permanently sealed in 1898 after disappearance of royal servant. Locals report sightings of a pale woman in traditional dress. Area considered spiritually sensitive. Access restricted. Arif leaned back in his chair. Heartbeat heavy. 1898. A disappearance. A pale woman. It couldn't be a coincidence. Just as he started to take notes, the lights above him flickered and died. Darkness. Then, faintly, from the hallway, tap, tap, tap. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. He wasn't alone. Arif held his breath. The sound of footsteps in the hallway was unmistakable, measured, soft but deliberate. They echoed across the worn wooden floor of the boarding house library as if someone walked barefoot through an empty temple. Tap, tap, tap. He reached slowly for his phone, hand trembling, but the screen was still black, dead. The library was a windowless chamber at the back of the building, the kind no one bothered with after sunset. The air had gone cold, unnaturally so, and with the power cut, the only thing left to guide him was the thin rectangle of light seeping in from under the door. He rose silently from his chair, trying to make out the rhythm of the steps. 1 second, 2 seconds, another tap, closer. He crouched low, creeping between bookshelves, careful not to knock over anything. The wood creaked beneath him, and he winced too loud. The footsteps paused. Then they started again, but not just from the hallway anymore. Now he could hear whispers, low, female, not quite in any language he recognized, like a chant, like a warning, or maybe a plea. Please, do not open it. His heart pounded. That voice, he knew it from the gate. The same soft cadence, filled with sorrow. Then came a sudden bang, as if someone had thrown their whole weight against the library door. Arif flinched and stumbled backward, knocking into the old filing cabinet behind him. A metal drawer slid open on its own, spilling aged papers onto the floor. Among them was a photograph, black and white. A group of royal servants in front of the northern gate. At the edge of the group stood a young woman barely in her 20s wearing a white kebaya. She was the only one not smiling. Her eyes, Arif had seen those eyes. He shoved the photo into his folder and rose quickly, heart racing. Another bang at the door, then silence. He waited, nothing. He stepped toward the door and opened it slowly. The hallway was empty. The lights were back on, but there, lying at his feet, was a single white flower, a frangipani, still wet from rain. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in his room, staring at the photograph under his desk lamp. The resemblance was too clear. Either someone was playing a horrific prank, or the girl from the sealed gate had been real once, and now something of her lingered. The next morning, he returned to the Keraton office archives in the city center, hoping to find more. He spoke to an elderly archivist named Pak Dardo, who had worked in the palace library for decades. When Arif mentioned the gate, the old man's eyes dimmed. Some doors are locked for good reason. Nak, he whispered, voice barely above a breath. The gate holds more than just wood and stone. It holds grief. Who was she? Arif asked, showing him the photo. Darto looked at it for a long moment before nodding slowly. Her name was Sikar Ayu, a royal servant. She disappeared one night and was never seen again. They say her spirit never left, still waiting. Waiting for what? Arif asked. The old man glanced toward the window for someone to listen. Arif sat in the quiet, musty corner of the palace archive room. Darto had left him alone, excusing himself with a quiet, "Be careful what you seek." His words rang louder than the creaking floorboards. The folder containing the photograph of Sikar Ayu now lay open before him. Next to it, an index of documents labeled Kadatan Dalam Tahan 1898. He sifted through yellowed pages. Most were mundane lists of repairs, inventories, servant rosters. Then he found it, a letter. Folded neatly in fragile paper, sealed with a wax emblem of the old royal crest, the script was written in elegant Javanese Aksara. He could barely read most of it, but the signature caught his eye, Sikar Ayu. His hands shook as he unfolded the fragile paper. With help from an online translation and the limited language skills he had, Arif began to piece together the message. The ink had faded, but the message was chilling. To whomever reads this, the gate must remain closed. I made a mistake. I entered the sacred chamber that was never meant for us. The whispers said they would protect the bloodline, but I was only a servant. Now they won't let me leave. Do not open the gate. I beg you. Arif leaned back in his chair, heart racing. The sacred chamber, a forbidden room inside the Karaton. He felt a prickling sensation on his neck. Someone was watching him. He turned slowly. Nothing but rows of shadowed cabinets. Then the sound again, not footsteps, breathing, slow, raspy breathing. He stood up abruptly. The air around him had shifted, he could feel it. And then the shadow. It moved between the filing cabinets, just out of full view. Tall, with long black hair, and the unmistakable outline of a white kebaya. Sikar Ayu, Arif whispered, barely aware he was speaking. The shadow stopped moving, the breathing ceased, and then a sudden gust of wind burst through the open window. Behind him, pages scattered, and the letter flew from his hand when he caught it mid-air. He noticed something strange. A second page had been folded within it. This one wasn't addressed to anyone. It was a list. Names, all crossed out except the last one. And that last name, Arif Ramadan. He dropped the paper. Impossible. He turned around in panic. Nothing, but on the glass of the archive cabinet behind him, a fresh handprint had appeared from inside, small, delicate, dripping with condensation. He stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of books. Suddenly, his phone buzzed, a new notification. Gallery updated. His breath caught as he opened it. It was a live photo taken just seconds ago, but he hadn't touched the camera. The image showed him sitting in the archive room, looking down at the letter, and behind him, a figure in white, leaning in from the cabinet, her face inches from his, eyes black, expressionless. Arif froze, staring at his phone screen. The photo was still there, unmoving, undeniable. He sat alone in the palace archive room, hunched over the letter, but behind him, captured in sharp detail, was a woman in white, her long hair draped forward like a curtain, her face just inches from his own, pale, hollow, watching. Yet when he looked over his shoulder in real life, there was nothing. No one, only silence. The air was stifling now, pressing in around him like an invisible fog. Something unseen yet deeply aware was still in that room with him. He packed up the scattered documents with shaking hands, shoving the old letter and photograph into his folder. The ancient paper crinkled like dried leaves. He needed to leave, now. But as he stepped toward the exit, he heard it again. A knock from inside the glass archive cabinet. 3 slow taps. Tap, tap, tap. He turned, heartbeat thundering. There, just beneath the condensation on the cabinet glass, a face was forming pale, with empty eye sockets that stretched far too wide, the same face from the photograph. And then the whisper returned. You read the letter. You saw the names. The voice was inside his head, like a memory, but laced with cold malice. You opened the gate. No, Arif whispered. I didn't. The glass shattered. Books flew from the shelves, scattering across the floor as if thrown by invisible hands. The overhead lights flickered violently, casting shadows that twisted and stretched along the walls. He bolted from the archive room, nearly falling over the threshold. The hallway outside was eerily quiet to quiet as he fled toward the main exit. He passed a mirror. He paused, breath-ragged dot in the mirror. He wasn't alone. Standing directly behind him in the reflection was the girl in white, her mouth open wide in a silent scream, her hands reaching for his neck. He turned around instantly. Nothing. The hallway was empty. But when he looked back at the mirror again, it was shattered and etched across its broken surface, as though carved by fingernails, were words in ancient Javanese script. Arif didn't understand it all, but one word was clear: punishment. Arif froze, staring at his phone screen. The photo was still there, unmoving, undeniable. He sat alone in the palace archive room, hunched over the letter, but behind him, captured in sharp detail, was a woman in white, her long hair draped forward like a curtain, her face just inches from his own, pale, hollow, watching. Yet when he looked over his shoulder in real life, there was nothing, no one, only silence. The air was stifling now, pressing in around him like an invisible fog. Something unseen yet deeply aware was still in that room with him. He packed up the scattered documents with shaking hands, shoving the old letter and photograph into his folder. The ancient paper crinkled like dried leaves. He needed to leave now, but as he stepped toward the exit, he heard it again. A knock from inside the glass archive cabinet. 3 slow taps. Tap, tap, tap. There, just beneath the condensation on the cabinet glass, a face was forming, pale, with empty eye sockets that stretched far too wide. The same face from the photograph. And then the whisper returned. You read the letter. You saw the names. The voice was inside his head, like a memory but laced with cold malice. You opened the gate. No, Arif whispered. I didn't. The glass shattered. Books flew from the shelves, scattering across the floor as if thrown by invisible hands. The overhead lights flickered violently, casting shadows that twisted and stretched along the walls. He bolted from the archive room, nearly falling over the threshold. The hallway outside was eerily quiet to quiet as he fled toward the main exit. He passed a mirror. He paused, breath-ragged, in the mirror. He wasn't alone. Standing directly behind him in the reflection was the girl in white, her mouth open wide in a silent scream, her hands reaching for his neck. He turned around instantly. Nothing. The hallway was empty. But when he looked back at the mirror again, it was shattered and etched across its broken surface, as though carved by fingernails, were words in ancient Javanese script. Arif didn't understand it all, but one word was clear: punishment. Arif couldn't move. The air inside the chamber pressed down on his chest like invisible hands. He stood frozen before the mirror, unable to look away from the image it now displayed. Himself and her, Sikar Ayu's reflection, stood behind him, unmoving, her smile too wide, her eyes bottomless. Her hand, ghostly and pale, was raised just above his shoulder in the reflection, but in reality, there was no one behind him, not yet. The mirror pulsed suddenly, like a heartbeat. Arif stumbled backward as a sharp jolt of pain ran down his spine like ice water had been poured into his bones. He collapsed to the stone floor, gasping. Whispers filled the chamber, dozens of them, hundreds. Disembodied voices spoke over one another, urgent and ancient, as though drawn from centuries of silence. The gate must remain closed. He read the names. The girl must not be freed. Arif clutched his head. The voices were inside him now, demanding, pleading, arguing. His eyes darted around the room for an escape, but the door had vanished. There was no exit, just stone and shadow. Then, at the base of the altar, something shifted, a trapdoor, slightly ajar. Drawn by desperation, Arif crawled toward it. Yanking it open, a staircase descended into total darkness, its stone steps slick with moisture and moss. He hesitated, but the whispers grew louder behind him, and the mirror began to crack fine lines snaking outward like spiderwebs. And in the reflection, Sikar Ayu's mouth opened as if to scream. Arif dove into the trapdoor. Down, down, each step took him deeper than seemed possible beneath the palace grounds. The smell changed no longer incense and rot, but earth and iron. He emerged into a narrow underground corridor, walls lined with bones, human bones stacked like bricks. At the end of the hallway stood an iron gate, ancient and sealed by a heavy chain, covered in writing he didn't recognize, but above it was a name carved into the arch, Gerbang Sikar, the Gate of Sikar. This was it, the locked gate, the one no one spoke of, the one that wasn't supposed to exist, and now it was rattling. The chains shook violently as something pounded against the other side. Boom, boom, boom. Dust fell from the ceiling with each strike. A voice came from behind the gate, softer than the pounding, almost pleading. "You've come this far, Arif. Let me finish what was started." Then, just below his feet, glowing faintly through the cracks of the stone floor, a seal revealed itself, a circular emblem with 7 ancient symbols. One of them now faded. Something had been broken, a binding. He hadn't just found the gate. He had weakened its seal, and now, whatever was behind it, wanted out.